Welcome to the SQL Data Partners podcast. My name is Carlos L. Chacon, your host, and this is episode 6. Now, today I'm super excited to have someone on the show that you probably already know. Steve Jones from SQLServerCentral.com is with us today. Steve is the editor-in-chief of SQLCentral.com, and he started working with SQL Server in 1991, which I'm pretty sure wasn't called SQL Server at that time. Today we're going to be talking about branding. Steve's got a great brand, and I'm super excited that he's been willing to share a little bit of his time and thoughts about building a brand. Ultimately, the goal here, or the idea, is that you can take some of these branding ideas, put them to use in your own environment, and hopefully additional opportunities will come your way. If you like today's episode, we invite you to give us a rating on iTunes. Give us some of that feedback and let us know what we're doing. If there's something you'd like to hear, you can hit me up at carlos.chacon@SQLDataPartners.com. Or, of course, I'm on Twitter at Carlos L. Chacon. If you like these episodes, we invite you to subscribe to our iTunes podcast. We are also now on Stitcher. We're excited about that. And as always, welcome to the show.
SQL Data Partners.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. So I still run SQL Server Central. That's, my primary day job. And that's a lot of what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I'm always writing and kind of producing the content there. So you'll certainly see me there. I work for Redgate Software as well. So they employ me to run SQL Server Central as well as to be an evangelist, which means that they send me around to a variety of events, starting to be all around the world, mostly in the US, but I'm doing more in Europe. I'm at a number of conferences every year and then a bunch of SQL Saturdays, as many as I can kind of fit in with, busy family life and all the other responsibilities I have at work.
Sure. There's no question that you keep a full schedule there. And so one of the things we wanted to talk about today was standing out from the pack, right? Building your own brand. Now, we aren't necessarily going to talk about getting famous, but we do want to talk about some ways that data professionals can present themselves in a little better light with the hope of having some more opportunities come their way. Now, the reason I wanted to have you on the show, Steve, is because of your own individual brand. You've got a great brand. And if folks are just starting out and they haven't met you, they'll probably be surprised when they first meet you. And one, you'll be in a Hawaiian shirt.
Yeah. Yes.
And two is that you'll walk up to them, you'll extend your hand and ask them a few questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so I think that's a great brand, and I think you might have some ideas for our listeners that they can try to apply to their own brand.
Absolutely. So what you just said, just introducing yourself, that's networking. That's a great way to just meet somebody else and get to know another person in the community, start to build a little bit of a bond, maybe make a friend, maybe make a contact of some sort. And that's one of those things that's helped me over the years. As a young man in high school and college, I was really shy, didn't know a lot of people. And, there's been plenty of times I've gone to events for schools early in my career where I didn't introduce myself. I kind of just sat in the back and found that, I wasn't really growing my career as much. There's only so much you can do in terms of being just a very smart young man or young woman today. It's great to be good at your job, to have a lot of technical skills, but really a lot of hiring, a lot of decisions for promotions, reviews, for bonuses, all those things, they come down to personal contacts and people liking you. So just being friendly is a great way to kind of grow your brand a little bit and meet other people. Just walk up to somebody. How you doing? My name is Steve. What do you do here? Why are you here today? What's your job? What are you interested in? Just a couple questions, just like you might do at, a party or something else, some other event there. That's certainly probably the best thing I think you could do for your career these days.
And I think one of the big misconceptions about networking, particularly, maybe 5-7 years ago, was that you wanted to do that to advance your own purposes. But I think, as you just mentioned, ultimately it is about extending your network, and you need to find out about what other people are doing. So asking those questions from people just to get a feel, right? Start that conversation going, and then in the potentially down the road, something may happen that may be of your benefit, but it doesn't necessarily need to be the goal.
Right. Certainly, you might help somebody else. We have a lot of people in the SQL community that are very open and friendly and willing to help others. And, maybe you'll meet somebody that you can help, or maybe you'll meet somebody that just can bounce an idea off later, ask a question of. I meet people all the time that are good at SSIS or reporting services or DAX or things that I'm not very good at. And
Sure.
when I have questions, there's somebody I can just call on that I've had a conversation with and say, hey, can I ask you a question?
Well, we talked a little bit about events, and we talked about getting to know people. Another thing that I'd like to encourage people to do is to get to know the vendors a little bit more. Again, this is kind of with the eye towards adding that into your network, particularly the product folks. Hey, what is it that you do and what problems are you trying to solve? Now, it may be, for example, a DAX vendor. I don't know if there's one out there like that. You may have nothing to do. That's not even on your radar. But the next person that you talk to might have something. And to be able to say, oh, hey, you know what? I just talked to so-and-so at this vendor. They might be able to help. You've provided value to that person, and the likelihood of them remembering who you are, skyrockets.
Exactly. Or somebody at work might ask you, hey, we need to do this thing with DAX. Do you know anything about it? And you go,
Right.
I met somebody a few months ago and, I'll ask them, I'll call them back. And certainly getting to know, vendors is a good idea because some of us go to work for vendors. Some of us leave vendors and go somewhere else. So there might be an opportunity for you to go to work there. Or like you said, just answer a question for somebody else or at least have an idea of what could work.
Right. And so I think the idea there tied in with the brand is that you're creating a brand of being able to provide value, of being knowledgeable about different things.
Exactly.
Having that network that people can at least run ideas by you, and that they'll know, well, hey, we're kind of stumped with something. Let's go ask Steve. Let's see what he thinks. Right.
Exactly.
And so as we go and we do this, right, we're networking. Individual events sometimes is difficult to get to. It can be cost prohibitive. So are there other ways to kind of grow that network? And social media obviously is one that has, exploded here lately, and I think allows, us to kind of scale our networking opportunities.
Absolutely. Social media is a great way. There may be groups in your local area. I mean, there's obviously past groups, SQL Server user groups in your area, but
Sure.
there are often industry groups as well. For example, in Denver, when I first moved here, we had a group called First Tuesday, and it was basically a happy hour, a restaurant or bar on the first Tuesday of the month where IT professionals would get together. Everybody from CTOs to DBAs and sysadmins would have the chance to have a drink, just meet other people and talk. Certainly there's those opportunities as well as more formal events that are industry specific. But, social networking is a great way that it works the same as any of those in-person events. I know it seems silly. It seems like we're not interacting with people when we're not doing it face to face, but you could build some great relationships across distance by using, Twitter or Facebook, instant messaging, even forum places like SQL Server Central or MSDN, the places where people ask questions and answer questions. You can really build these strong bonds in the same way that, 100 years ago, we did it by having pen pals, by writing letters back and forth. Except today, we can do it in real time or in near real time.
Now, one of the things we wanted to, encourage folks, or at least from my standpoint, is that you can use social media for many things, but we want to convey a professional air, if you will, when we're trying to build our brand from a data professional perspective, right? I think there are certain social medias like Facebook, for example. I know a couple of people out there that are like, if you're going to invite me to your wedding, or you think I might invite you to my wedding, then we can connect on Facebook. Otherwise, we need to go to other mediums to kind of interact in that professional way. And I think, so kind of separating the lines in a sense with, here's my brand, here's who I am in the social media from a data professional perspective versus here's my kids and my grandma at the family reunion.
Exactly. You certainly need to draw some separations. Denny Cherry is a friend of mine. He's a well-known consultant in the U.S. that does a lot of SQL Server work. And, he is across all the social media areas where he posts. And recently, he actually made that separation where he set up a professional Facebook side for his business and for his career. And then he broke that with his personal Facebook group because he posts his opinions and different ideas on Facebook that aren't work related. And certainly
Sure.
you can cross a line just like at work when you're actually in an office. There are some topics, religion, politics, things that you don't necessarily want to get too involved in at work because it's not necessarily appropriate. You may offend somebody, or you may get yourself too worked up and get upset. You may say something inappropriate. So I always encourage people to think about separating those out. For example, my Facebook is completely set to private for only my friends, so I don't share anything out there professionally. And I typically don't connect with professionals on Facebook. It's typically for family and friends. But there is Twitter and my blog and LinkedIn and other places where I do connect with other professionals, and I'm aware of what I post there really reflects on me as a DBA and a SQL Server professional, and don't necessarily want to post things there or advocate for things that aren't appropriate for my career.
Sure. And ultimately, again, we're talking about that brand. And so, yeah, you can be, a political moderator if that's what you want to do, but do that in that space.
Absolutely.
Right? If you're going to create the social media space to build your brand as a data professional, then the topics and the related information needs to at least somewhat align with that. Now, sure, you go to an event, you post pictures and stuff. That's all, again, involved with that brand.
Exactly. We all know we're all conservative or liberal or independent or something. Right? We all know that. But when I'm trying to decide if you're the person I call for an interview or you're the person I want to hire, I don't really want to see that, because it serves no real purpose. It's as likely to offend me or upset me as it is to attract me to you. So we want to present a positive, very professional image to potential employers, recruiters, employers, HR people, hiring managers, somebody that's going to look at our profile on social media. We want them to see somebody that they want to hire that's going to fit in that position well. So, if you want to be a political commentator or you have a band, you're a musician or something, have a separate Twitter account, a separate Facebook, just have a different place where you put that stuff. It can be overwhelming, particularly to see some of the other folks in the community who appear to be on social media 24/7. Yeah, yes, indeed. They're posting a lot of stuff out there. I know I look at it, I'm like, wow. So do we need to be on there all the time? Like what's the balance? I've been meaning to ask some of these folks that post a lot, how they do that. And, it certainly is. It's amazing sometimes how many tweets or Facebook posts I see from some people. It's incredible. Certainly there are some tools that help you post to multiple places or automate things that can maybe make it look like you're more active than you are. But really, I look at social media just like I look at other social situations. So at the office, I may get up and go get a cup of coffee and I have the chance to chat with somebody in the hallway or in the kitchen and along the way, or I may catch somebody going in and out of a building and spend a couple of minutes there. And that's really how I treat social media. I try not to be too bogged down in it. Part of my job as an evangelist is to keep track of it. So I certainly do. We have some professional accounts for SQL Server Central and at Redgate that are on social media. And we monitor those a little more heavily. But for my account, I may pop it up and look at it, and then I just go on about my day for a while. Maybe I take a couple minutes just to see something later, go on about my day. If I'm at an event or if something is caught my eye that I'm reading, I may post that over there as well. But try not to. The purpose isn't to be on social media, right? The purpose is to be active with other people socially at your schedule, at your pace, whatever works for you. So I don't set goals. And in fact, I make it a point to, turn things off. Like I don't have Twitter up today. It's just off because I've got other things I need to accomplish today. And I don't need a distraction. Just like at work, I might put on headphones and just sit at my desk for a while because I need to actually get something done. Twitter can definitely be a big distraction. It can. And I also think, just like with the community, we shouldn't necessarily be reserved in trying to share some other things. As we start building our brand and start trying to, help others, some of that, so most of us, particularly myself, right? There's nothing that I'm going to share that a lot of other people don't already know. But there may be other folks in my network that aren't as familiar with it. Let's just take an example like high availability, right? Right. I maybe come up with something about high availability, always on. That there's books on it, right? There's people, MVPs that are in that space. However, my network may still benefit from some of those things. So I don't think we should be nervous or feel like the content that we're trying to provide is less valuable. Because again, that building our brand of folks who are willing to share that information, it will be helpful to someone. Absolutely. I think one of the things that we don't realize sometimes is how absolutely huge the world is. It is stunningly large. And, even something that's incredibly popular on Twitter really only makes it to a small fraction of the people that are out there because they're not available at that time. They're busy looking at something else. They just skip by it because there's, a whole list of other posts or things that are there. So
Sure.
I completely agree. You shouldn't get too bogged down in the idea that everybody else has seen what you've seen. The way that we personalize things these days, the way the software allows us to kind of customize the views means that it's entirely possible a lot of the people that haven't seen something, or they may not have seen the exact thing that popped up 3 seconds ago, but if you post it, it'll appear there. Or if you blog about it, it's there. So to me, I always recommend people think about what does this look like when somebody's looking at me, not just what the world sees. Because potentially an employer that looks at my blog or looks at my social media timeline is looking for me to find out information about me. So it's important that they see something about how I interact with the world, how I think, what my knowledge is, rather than in the context of what everybody else has done.
Yeah, that's a great point. And again, kind of building that brand, right? So that way
Exactly.
when they look at your book of work, they can see it in totality there. So let's talk a little bit about your brand. And actually, as I got into it, it's quite diverse, right?
Yeah.
So we talked about the editor at SQL Server Central. You've got Database Weekly. You're with Redgate Software. You also host another site, themodernresume.com.
Yes.
You're at you blog at Voice of the DBA. You actually put out some podcasts under that same name as well.
Yes.
So the Way Out West, your handle from a Twitter perspective, and then your Hawaiian shirts.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So I went through that and I thought, holy cow, right? That's a lot of stuff. It sounds like a lot of work. So how do you keep that up?
How do I do that? Yeah. So sometimes I look at my life and the amount of chaos that's involved is stunning to me at times. And I think I'm really just getting through the week some weeks. The Hawaiian shirts are easy. I buy, 2 or 3 a year. So that builds up over time. And then it's a question of grabbing a clean one that's ironed and throwing it in a suitcase. So that one's easy. Some of what I do in that variety is because it's a little bit of experimentation. It's a little bit of trying to understand what works and doesn't work. And it's a little bit of trying to see how different areas there may reach different people. So I make it responses or comments in different places on similar things I've posted. And so some of it is a little bit of experimentation for me. For somebody that's building their brand, for the most part, it's just about them. They're not trying to advocate for anything other than their own career. Whereas I work for a company, so I'm obviously advocating for them a little bit, with the podcast
Sure.
and the events and some of the other things I do. The reason I have the Voice of the DBA as a blog as opposed to just having SQL Server Central is I recognize I may not maintain this job forever, or I may want to go to work elsewhere. And so I want my own brand, my own place where I can have copies of all my work there. And so really I maintain that blog there specifically to build my career. So if I actually have to go look for a job at some point, that's the place where I would try to send everybody. My professional career is kind of the SQL Server Central stuff, and that's what I do. Database Weekly was a spinoff from there as a way to kind of diversify our business. Fortunately, I don't have to do that every week. I only do about every third or fourth one, depending throughout the year. Because as Redgate purchased SQL Server Central and Database Weekly, and so I have a staff of people at Redgate that help me do different pieces, and they do some of that. The Modern Resume is a little bit of my volunteering effort. It's a little bit of trying to give back to people to help them improve their careers. And certainly I go to some of the SQL Saturdays to advocate for Redgate, but about half of my go-to is really just volunteer effort for me. I'm taking time out of my life to A, improve my career because I can talk about different things, but B, it's a volunteer effort to try to teach people something, try to go and speak and help somebody else either get better at SQL Server or at their career or something else. So, I tend to do a lot. I've been successful at it and I've gotten a little bit lucky in my career. But what I try to get people to do is think about pacing. Certainly there are times of the year I don't travel or my family comes first. Other things with my kids come first. And so I have to put work and other things on a little bit of a pause there, or I have to shift work around to make time for them. And that's what I encourage everybody else to do. You got to build your career and it's important, but it's got to fit around the rest of your life. You've got to remember you have hobbies, you have a family, you have parents or kids or something else. So try to keep it in some kind of balance there.
So you bring up an interesting point there with the volunteering, and you mentioned that you do quite a bit of that. How do you think volunteering helps a person build a brand?
There's a number of things there. The one thing I come back to from a career perspective is that I've managed lots of people, big groups, small groups, and in different areas over my career. And I never want to micromanage somebody. I never want to have them be told to do every little thing. So if I ask them to set up a server, I don't expect to ask them to also set up backups and set up maintenance plans and go ask somebody what security they need or those other things. I kind of expect them to do a little bit more than I ask them to do. Volunteering is a great way to show that you're willing to do more than you're asked to do, especially if you volunteer at work. If you volunteer to teach somebody something or to build a utility or do something that helps another group, it's a great way to, make your job easier, somebody else's job easier, but it shows that you're willing to do a little bit extra at work. And that's a valuable skill because so many people are happy to just go do the bare minimum at work. And if that's what you want to do, or maybe that's the place you are in your life, that's fine. Certainly people get married and divorced, somebody's sick, right? They have times in their lives where they need to just do the bare minimum. If you do that for your entire career, if you do that for, decades, you're just an average person and you're not necessarily a great employee for me as a manager. So volunteering is one of those ways to show that you do more. The other thing is volunteering outside of work on top of helping your mental health, because I think it's important that you give back and help society some way at some point in your life. You also build these skills in terms of just getting things done when you often don't have good supervision or good requirements or good direction in a volunteer effort. A lot of times volunteers, they just say, I need some stuff done. Would you please do it? And you have to figure it out. Those are great skills and stories that aren't really appropriate to talk about most of the time. But in terms of your career, those are good places to talk about, hey, I'm learning these skills or I've done this thing elsewhere.
I think from the volunteering perspective, another benefit is the ability to be around other like-minded people, right? People who are working towards that goal, right? They're trying to break away from the pack, if you will. And by doing that, rubbing shoulders with them, getting engaged in activities that they like, you'll be able to build your network outside of the domain, outside of your work environment. And you never know what kind of, again, networking opportunities might arise from that.
Exactly. And there's lots of technical opportunities to volunteer. There's give camps around the U.S. where we code for charities. You can spend a day or two doing that. Lots of organizations, from churches to nonprofits to charities, they need technical help a lot of times, and they can't really pay for it very much. And, if you're willing to volunteer an hour a week or 2 hours a month or something like that, it could be a great help to them and also build some skills for you.
Sure. Now, we don't want to be pessimistic, but I feel like, we should put a word of warning, right? As occasionally, particularly volunteering at work is probably a good example. Every once in a while, right, the flaming bag of poo is going to come your way and you've just raised your hand, right? I'll take it. So yes, that will happen. You will have to work through that, right? Every assignment that you take won't be the CEO, chatting with the CEO or, taking him out to lunch, kind of thing.
Right.
But again, working through that, showing that you're willing to put in, that dedication, that hours, when things then do become important, right? Your manager has something that's critical to their path. They're more likely to pick you for the team because they know that you're willing to put in the effort.
Exactly.
And then if that is successful, the rewards are, the big upside.
It could be a big upside. Absolutely. Right. It could be a downside too. I mean, the other thing is if you volunteer to do something at work and you're doing this and all of a sudden it becomes more important, you may get stuck with two jobs. Right. So,
sure.
I always say though, whenever you're going to volunteer like that, especially if you're doing something at work, make sure your manager or somebody knows about it and that they've kind of given it a blessing or an approval that even if it's kind of tacit, at least they have agreed that you're going to do something else and they understand where your time is going and what you're doing.
Right. Yeah. So then that feedback then becomes important to let them know, hey, this task that I've been assigned or that I've volunteered to take, whatever, this is the status, this is where I'm at.
Right.
I may need some help, whatever.
Exactly. And then, always make sure you kind of document, keep track of this stuff. I mean, like I said, a lot of your volunteer efforts aren't necessarily going to be appropriate for you to, talk about or blog about something, but they are things you want to keep track of for a review or for the next interview that you have. They are good stories and they are appropriate in those places to talk about that.
Sure. Exactly. And I think, overall, right, consistency then is the key, right? So to consistently kind of being out there, making yourself available. Again, it doesn't have to be 24/7, but doing something on a regular basis. I think about, like a McDonald's. Now, that's a big brand, right?
Right.
But you can walk into a McDonald's in Kansas, in California, or in the Congo, and you are going to know the layout, and you're going to know you're going to get a Big Mac, and it's going to be pretty much the same.
Right.
Right. And so I think that's what folks are looking from a brand, right? Is like some consistency. And if you're willing to put in that effort, then you can build that brand. And again, hopefully the opportunities will come your way.
Right. And like I said, it doesn't have to be a ton of time, right? Maybe you go out on
Right.
Twitter once a week or, LinkedIn once a week and you post something or you respond to something. You provide that consistency that Carlos is talking about just on a regular basis. Because again, ultimately, at times, stop and look at your profile. Go pull up your particular profile. Like I'll go to Twitter and look at Way Out West and I'll just see kind of what I've posted there and how that looks. Or I'll go to LinkedIn and I'll kind of just look at my status activity, because when somebody goes to look at my career, that's what they look at, not all the stuff that I've done, a few minutes here and there. They kind of see it as one group. So I want to show that.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, thanks, Steve. I do appreciate the conversation. I think that there's been some valuable information shared.
My pleasure.
So before we let you go, just a couple of standard questions to add a little bit of value to those listeners. One of the things we like to talk about is some of our favorite SQL tools, right? So this can be a paid tool, a free tool, right? But what's your favorite tool and why do you use it?
So what's my favorite tool? Right now, in terms of what I do, which is a lot of kind of ad hoc, just variety of touching things on SQL Server, it has to be SQL Prompt. I work for Redgate Software and they make SQL Prompt, but it's one of those tools that's absolutely incredible for me because a lot of times when I'm trying to find out what a parameter is or I'm not sure what the next way to write code is, that comes up very often. It pops it up and it's really handy. I've been using it since before Redgate actually purchased the tool. And so it's amazing to me. And it's quite noticeable when I'm on an instance that doesn't have prompt installed in Management Studio that I don't love the Microsoft IntelliSense. I haven't tried it in 2016, but certainly in the previous versions, it was less helpful. And no IntelliSense is difficult for me at times because I'm expecting things to be there. So that's the tool I use a lot.
So you've been talking a little bit about branding, and I guess I'm wondering if there's maybe a favorite story or experience that you've had around branding that, or in the data field, right? That has helped you or can capture why it is that you enjoy doing what you do.
So why do I enjoy branding? There's a lot of stories. I've certainly had probably no shortage of stories where somebody has gotten a job through their brand, on social media or somewhere else. But, one of the things that really helped me early on in my career figure out where the branding matters is my wife. She spent 20 years in high technology. I think she worked for 6 or 7 companies and, 8 or 9 different jobs in those times. But in all that time, she's really only had to send out groups of resumes once. She got one job, and she's very personable. She's been good technically at her job, but the efforts that she's made to always get to know other people, network well, talk about her experiences with her managers has paid off. And in all that time in her career, in the 20 years, she was constantly being called by people to say, "Hey, I have a job for you," or "Send me your resume because I have a position that I'd like to get you hired for." And that worked out great for her. And even though she left technology, 4 years ago and started her own business, self-employed, she's been called every year by people that know her that say, "Hey, would you like to come work for us again?" And to me, that's an example of an amazing brand, maybe an extreme example, but it's worked out really well for her. And I've seen plenty of other people have, small levels of success just with some networking, a little bit of social media, and then, blogging or being good at their job.
Okay, we have one more question, but before we do that, Steve, I'd like to take a second for our listeners to hear about another way they can learn about SQL Server.
Hello there, compañeros. I want to tell you about a unique SQL Server training opportunity that is unlike anything you've encountered. And as a listener of this podcast, you're entitled to a special offer. SQL Cruise is a premier training experience set in the most unlikely of places, a cruise ship. Tim and Amy Ford have created a wonderful culture on SQL Cruise. With 5 or 6 technical leads from various industry sectors, you and roughly 20 other students will talk shop in classes while at sea. And while you are in port, you can enjoy the wonderful world we live in, either by yourself or with the group. The beauty of SQL Cruise is the unique relationships you will form with other SQL cruisers. Worried about leaving your spouse? Bring them along. I did, and she had a great time with the group. In fact, I have been on SQL Cruise twice, and I'm looking to go a third time. You may be wondering if this is serious training, and I can assure you it is as good as any conference you will attend on land. It never crossed my mind that I could be talking about SQL Server with several Microsoft MVPs on the beaches of St. John's. I know you must have other questions, so I suggest you head over to SQLcruise.com and check out the site. Once you are satisfied and you want to sign up, when you get to the question, would you be so kind to share the name of who referred you and what source material led you to us? You enter SQL Data Partners, and Tim will ensure you get $100 off the training registration. This is a great offer, and I hope this $100 savings will entice you to check out the site. I did, and went on the Caribbean cruise and had a great experience, and I know you will too. Maybe I'll see you on board. So head on over to SQLcruise.com and use the code SQL Data Partners to save $100. Okay, Steve, for our last question, if you could have one superhero power, what would it be, and why would you want it?
One superhero power, huh? Geez, I think, I don't know. I need something to heal my knees and joints right now because I'm getting older. I'm almost 50 and I am struggling with that. So maybe healing. Maybe healing is my power right now as I'm almost 50. And actually, I pulled a hamstring yesterday at playing baseball. And so I'm limping around today.
Oh, boy. Okay,
so healing,
there you go.
if I could be a super healer, that would be what I want.
Well, very good. Well, thanks again for being on the show, Steve. We do appreciate it. As always, compañeros, we'll see you on the SQL Trail.
SQL Data Partners.